that. This is our first ever showing our webcams, because nowadays it seems we're on Zoom meetings or Teams meetings and WebExes, and you're always sharing your webcam. But for webinars, even though the technology's been there for like 10 years, no one ever does it. So this is really our first webcam sharing. So we're pretty excited that you can actually see who you're talking to today. And we're excited to bring you the first webinar in our series for the next couple months on Reveal. And what we're going to talk about today is dashboard best practices, do's and don'ts. It's a very fun webinar. There's a lot of cool information in this webinar, and I think you're going to enjoy the content and the demo as well. So with us today is Casey McGuigan. She is our product manager for Reveal. Many of you know her from the emails that you get or interacting with her as customers. My name's Jason Barris. I'm a Senior VP of Developer Tools here, and obviously I work on Reveal. We work on Reveal all the time. So this is a great product, exciting product for us. It's a growing product. It has a lot of killer features. We're heavily invested in moving this product forward. So not only do we think it's really competitive today, but we want to hear your feedback. So as you're using the product and trying it out, please let us know what we can do to continue to make it useful for you. So today we are going to look at the do's and don'ts, the best practices. So I have a quick agenda here. We're going to look at understanding the importance of data viz, how the brain processes visuals, best practices. We have a hall of shame, which the hall of shame is, once you see some of these visualizations, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I see those every night on the news. It's amazing how much people lie through data visualization, and it's worse now than it ever has been, because people now are getting the hang of it. We'll do a demo, then we'll wrap it up. Quick housekeeping. Tomorrow, John in marketing is going to send out the recording, a link to the slides in a follow-up email. So make sure if we go to your other or junk, look for that tomorrow. And then there's a questions window. Please ask questions in the questions window. While I'm talking, Casey's going to answer, and when she's demoing, I will answer those questions. And for the series that we're working on, so this is June 10th. We've got today's webinar. June 24th, we're going to do one on advanced analytics with R and Python. The 8th, we're going to do building a data-driven org. The 27th, we'll look at machine learning. And August 5th, we'll finish it up with using the SDK to modernize an existing app. So for example, if you have a Windows Forms or WPF app, how can I make that more modern? Maybe create new revenue streams with Reveal. We're going to walk you through that. So in 2 weeks, you'll be, if you're interested in how you can extend Reveal using tools like R and Python, that's the webinar for you to check out. So it's pretty cool stuff. And we'll continue to make you aware of that through our email system, as well as this link, infragistics.com/webinar. So let's get right to it and talk about the importance of data visualization. Just to level set, what is data visualization? Data visualization is a graph. So you're taking data, you're putting it into a picture, which will help us remember that data better. So when we talk about data visualization, the word chart, the word graph, use all these things independently. The dashboard is a collection of these data visualizations. At Infragistics, working on Reveal, we have charts, and we've had charts in our developer tools product for 30 years now. And then we start building a tool, Reveal, for dashboards, and we didn't know what to call it. Do we call it visualizations? Do we call them widgets in a dashboard? Do we call them charts, graphs, whatever? They all mean the same thing. It really boils down to that visual representation of the data to help you understand it better. And the reason this is important is because we are all programmed to think visually. If you look at this table really quickly, and I ask you who the tallest person is, or who are the 3 people in the middle that have a similar height, it would take you a few seconds to figure it out. But if I look at it at a graph, I actually can get an idea much quicker of the range of the heights of the individuals in my data set. Even better, using tools of the visualizations, if I sort the data, I can instantly tell. You can instantly say Bob, Jack, and Sandrine are in the middle somewhere. Stevie and Dr. Evil are the tallest. So without the visualization, it makes it very difficult to actually understand what the data is that you're looking at. The sad thing is there's millions or tens of millions of people that are making decisions based on tables today and not visualizations. The decisions would be made better, clearer, and there's all kinds of stories about disasters that happen because of looking at data incorrectly and not visually. And why does this happen? Because 65% of people are visual learners. You know, we all say, oh, I need to actually see it and kind of like see what it looks like and play with it before I remember. That's totally normal. So if I look at a chart, I can easily remember Dr. Evil and Stevie were the tallest. If I looked at the table, because it's not a visual tool, it would be very difficult. Another interesting piece of information, I was actually in Germany in February giving a similar talk, and there was a study that came out that said we process images 60,000 times faster than text. So that's like the best argument right there to start looking at visualizations and including visualizations in what you're doing to tell stories about your data. And then it takes 13 milliseconds to recognize an image. So I look at when you're at a restaurant and you're going to the restroom and there's a picture on the wall of a male and a female. And these are like standard pictures. So instantly you know which way to go. The one thing I don't like is when you go to a Mexican restaurant and they have like the people dressed differently. They're trying to make it in their brand or their theme. Or you go to a German restaurant and there's a guy with a mug or a woman with a tray or something like that. Those aren't common images. So even though we can process images faster, we still don't immediately recognize what they mean. With data visualizations, there's probably about 30 to 50 different chart types of varying, adorners and whatnot. Maybe you could get up to 150, but they're very common. So having that standardized common way of looking at data, it makes it instantly recognizable to us to support why it really matters to use this visualization. And then what we remember, this as well, there's some great stories about this. One of the studies I talk about in another talk is a group of economists were given a report, and the report had a typical economic data in tables, heavily laden with text, and then they were asked questions about that data afterwards. So the folks that, and then it was kind of split up, some had charts and graphs, some had tables. The folks that just had the tables and the text, they had like 4 out of 5 of the questions they answered were incorrect. The folks that had visuals plus text, they had 4 out of 5 correct instead of incorrect. So having a spoken word plus a visual, text plus a visual will make you remember it more. And it comes out all the time, and you'll see it today in our presentation. So this is really interesting. Microsoft did a study about this. So how do we pay attention? What's our attention span? So in 2000, and keep in mind, Microsoft watches everything you do, which I think is really interesting. We worry about privacy and we always loop together Facebook, Google, and these other folks. But think about Microsoft. They've had Windows running on in your home and in your business for now going on 30 years, watching what you're doing, how quickly you do things, getting all of this information to be able to report on things like in 2000, the year 2000, the average attention span was 12 seconds. So that meant I'm looking at something and in 12 seconds, I kind of have to look elsewhere. This has now fallen to 8 seconds. So in 20 years, we've dropped 4 seconds off of our attention span. And it's evident, you're in a meeting, people cannot just focus on what the topic is. Now it's worse with Teams and Zoom. People are typing during the meeting, they're looking off to the side. I'm looking off to the side because my camera's off to the side, my screen's over here. But the point is, it's evident in what we're doing, but it doesn't mean we got dumber. It just means that there's more stuff going on in our lives. We're getting pinged constantly by beeps on our phone, alerts on our screens, etc. But what this boils down to is a goldfish has a 9-second attention span. Humans have 8. So the human attention span now has fallen to less than a goldfish. You think about over evolution, a goldfish is basically just swimming around looking, so there's really nothing to knock off their attention span numbers. Humans will continue to decrease because of all of the incoming stuff, and it's going to be harder and harder for us to focus on something for a long period of time. So everything that we do has to help the user, the reader, the viewer of what story we're trying to tell to make it stick. So we need to get people to really focus for those 8 seconds, maybe 12 seconds, whatever it is, to get them to remember that story we're trying to tell with our visualizations. So when we think about that, it really does make this topic, tools like Reveal, more important than ever. People have less attention span. They need to make decisions faster. The world is moving at like a 10x internet speed right now. So how do we help our users and our customers do this? We need to help everybody take this complex business data and make it consumable, help users make decisions, and to tell that story. And you'll even notice on this slide, and I do it in a couple other slides, I just highlight the words that are important. So immediately when you read this, make it consumable, help make decisions, tell a story, it makes sense, move on. Let's get to it. We always have to put words around it to give the complete sentence, but that's the gist of it, and that's what you need to do in your visualizations. On the bottom, charts can tell a story. This is not a presentation on data storytelling. We have another presentation on that. Maybe we'll do a webinar on that as part of this series later in August. But there are two types of ways of presenting your story, either in an exploratory way or an explanatory way. And they are slightly different. And I use the word data storytelling, telling the story about your data, a lot in this presentation, because that's really what you're doing. You're creating a dashboard, or you're creating a visualization to tell a story to get to a result. And sometimes that result leads to more discussion. Sometimes it just leads to a decision immediately. But the idea is we are using data to tell a story to get to an end result. So when we think about how we tell stories, it's important to know, or at least have a general idea of how the brain works and how we conceive, or how human cognition works, cognition. So when we think about a dashboard, this is a perfect example of something that is designed, and it's been designed over, 100 years. And it's continuing to get designed to make it more effective. So there's a reason you've got RPM and miles as the biggest circles in the middle of the dashboard, and then something like oil temperature is lower. And then there's that red switch over there on the right-hand side. It's not labeled, but it must be really important because you have to flick it up and then do it. It's probably like your nitrous oxide or something. But when we think about the dashboard of a vehicle, and then even fast forwarding, if you watch the SpaceX launch a couple weeks ago, where the rocket went into space with humans for the first time in a decade in the US, we see that things evolve to make them easier and easier to use. The dashboard in a car is designed to give you the most important information, and our brain immediately goes to the largest things that are in the middle because it's important. But at the same time, we kind of see this red thing over in the left-hand side. Don't know what that is. But my point with the dashboard is, even in a vehicle, you look at the dashboard, everything is designed to make sure that you have the most important data right in front of you to operate the vehicle. So when we think about graphics, graphics are cognitive tools that extends what our brain remembers. This is one of my favorite visualizations that you've probably seen many times, but it's basically a bunch of dots in rows, or is it in columns? Based on how your brain works, you're seeing this as a bunch of rows or a bunch of columns, or vice versa. Same with the two images below it. Do you see a vase, or do you see two people looking at each other? The image on the right, do you see the attractive woman, or do you see the older woman who's not as attractive? The brain is focusing in on the shapes, the curves, and it's telling us what to actually see. And what happens with the brain is that we're constantly, things are coming in and then things are leaving. Every few seconds, things are coming in and things are leaving. So it only retains what's important. And that's why it's important that when you design your visualizations and use these best practices, you're actually highlighting the things that matter the most. So our brain is actually programmed to look for specific attributes. And you'll see here, the stimulus that stands out the most will help you complete your analysis. And this is called selective visual attention and pre-attentive processing. So if I kind of bring up our ways to actually use these signal techniques, they'll become very obvious to you that, yeah, that makes perfect sense. This is like what I see all the time, or how I notice things all the time. Well, there's actually science behind this. And if you know about the Gestalt theory, he talked about this and how we use these signals to tell our brain what to focus on, or to move our focus onto something else. So what the brain does is it looks at position, the 2D or 3D position of objects, size being height, width, arc, the size of a circle, like the volume. Form is something, a line, angle, is it a square, is it an arc, is it in a circular space. Appearance, you could have blinking measures, large tones, heavy tones, saturation. Movement, like direction, flicker, speed of movement, and then quantity, so things like groups of bubbles. So immediately under quantity, you see that there's 3 groups of bubbles here. What do those groups mean? Well, we don't know yet, because there's really nothing to tell us that in this visualization, but immediately our brain goes to this and says, yeah, there's 3 groups and one looks like it has more than the other. And so this is what our brain is doing, and this is what we are doing and you need to do in your visualizations to help folks looking at your visualizations actually focus on what's important, and then know what you want them to leave that visualization with, what story you're trying to tell. So again, when we talk about pulling this together into charts, we look at what's the most effective and what's the least effective. So out of the 6 areas that I just showed you, we can use these in different ways to ensure that our point gets across effectively in the story that we're trying to tell. So when we look at the most effective ways for our brain to not only understand what we're looking at, but remember it, it's 2D position, the length. So think about the length of a bar or a column chart, the angle, think of a line chart, and then added marks. So is there highlights, is there markers, something like that. And then there's least effective ways of trying to convey or help people understand information. Area, color, texture, and volume will actually not help you tell your story. They could confuse people, or they could leave people with a different result than actually you were trying to get them to. So when you think about color and texture, we'll look at some best practices around that, and I'll show you a tool you can use. That's one of the biggest violators. And when I look at color and texture, I think about charts that you see on the news, and it's clear that it was like a marketing department that put it together, because, and then someone liked the shade of green, for example, because all the circles in the pie or the slices are like a different shade of green. You can't tell the difference. What is that green color? A percentage of the population is colorblind. How can they tell? It looks all gray to them. So looking at texture and color is very risky. Volume, things like bubble charts are very risky to use, and I'll show you some examples of these in our do's and don'ts later. So if you want to be successful, use some of the signal techniques we talked about earlier, and then look at these 4 ways of representing your visualizations, either through 2D position, length, angle, or added marks. So with that sort of background information, which many of you are like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now I have a context to how I can use that in my data visualizations. Let's look at these best practices. So the first thing we want to do, and this also goes back to our dashboard of the vehicle, is that understand the user first. You know, I'm sure when the Model T Ford was built 100 years ago, they didn't nail the dashboard in their first try. I don't know if they had a dashboard, but things evolve over time, and we learn on how the brain works and how people expect to see information. But no matter what, you are developing this for a user. So make sure that you're including the user first. This doesn't mean that you go to the internet and type in beautiful dashboard template and then just use that and then try to shoehorn your data in, because that means you're not thinking about the user, you're thinking about beauty and how it's going to look. Make sure that you're designing this in a way that you know what the user expects at the end of analyzing your data story. And here I've got a bunch of questions that you can ask yourself, and you can even ask your user. So who'll be using it? What's the audience? What questions? Do I need one visualization or multiple? Does the title of the dashboard or chart give me enough, or do I need to augment it with additional information? And then what are these techniques that I can use to highlight the story, the important data points? And then is this an explanatory visualization or an exploratory visualization? So these are things that are the #1 best practice by far. In most discussions we have, it's always about, oh, what chart type should I use for this? Well, yeah, that is important. It's actually the #2 best practice, but #1 is, what does the user actually expect to get out of that chart? So if we go to #2, there's all kinds of information on the internet about what visualization to use for the type of data that you are trying to represent. And I go back to, what story are you trying to tell with your data? Are you trying to compare data? Are you trying to show data as a part to a whole, like out of 100%, here's the breakdown within that? You know, should I use a pie chart, a tree map, a funnel chart? Am I showing data distribution through like a scatter chart or like a bubble chart that has a bubble size as a dimension to that? Am I doing trend analysis? So maybe financial data, sales data, marketing lead data, et cetera, manufacturing output data, or I need a date time axis, and then I want to look at lines or splines and then really analyze what's going on and maybe zoom in and zoom out of that based on day or hour or minute or quarter or month. Do I want to filter that data? Am I looking at relationships of data? Do I want to just show KPIs and gauges, which are very popular and really easy to read and tell a quick story? Or am I showing data geospatially? So is there a location involved? Is it important that my marketing lead data is plotted on a map, or is it just kind of like leads per day versus store performance by county? Maybe I'm going to show that on a map, because if I show a bubble chart on a map, I can instantly get information on who's doing good and who's doing bad based on that, versus maybe a line chart or maybe a table. So think about the data, think about the questions you're trying to answer, and then look at these categories of visualizations to drive what decision-making you should use to use the visualization. There is a very cool example of a much more detailed view of this. The Financial Times, if you do a Google search for Financial Times data visualization chooser or something, they have this nice graph. There's so many charts on it because Financial Times has a lot of visualizations, but it goes into even like 10x depth of this. What I'm showing you here is going to hit like 80%, like the 80-20 rule. This will cover you for 80% of what you need. Now you've understood that here's what the user wants, here's the visualization. Make sure you use proper colors in text. Most of us, unless you have a visual design background or you're in a really marketing background, aren't good at picking colors. And colors make or break everything. Everything from an app you install on your mobile phone to the way that you look at a visualization. So there are rules around color. So you use a diverging color palette when a central value is shared between both ends, sequential with numeric or ordered values, and a categorical when the data is just a category. So for example, you could have, by division or by food type or something like that you're trying to explain sales in a bar chart. There's a tool out there called Viz Palette, and I am going to bring that up right now so you can see what it looks like. I highly recommend you just go check out Viz Palette if you're having some arguments or discussions or want to explore how colors look. This is great because it will give you different ways that this would look to people with color blindness issues. You can look at it as a chroma, a colorological, or use their their color brewer algorithm. And then here what I can do is I can just start mucking around, and then whatever I do, it'll update the visualization on the right. And then I can copy this RGB, hex, or HSL values and just paste it right into my application. So, and then the other thing, if you're looking at using this for different themes, like let's say I want to do it on a black theme or a light theme, easy enough to do there. So use tools like Viz Palette. Just do a search for Viz Palette, and I have the link in the slides, and this will pretty much answer all of the color questions that you have, and it'll really put you on the right path to using a good color scheme for your visualizations. Now with Reveal, we've already done all the work for you. You don't have to think about it. But if you don't like our palette, you can actually choose different starting colors, and then the palette will change. And then in the SDK, you can apply your own color palette scheme. So you can make it look just branded, like if you work for, I don't know, 7-Eleven, and your colors are like white, green, red, and something else, then that might be your palette for your charts. Probably not a good idea, but you can do that with Reveal. This is an example of a typical breakdown using colors, using a 3D chart. We won't go into that now, but if you don't pick the right color palette and you're using a visualization like this, and we see it all the time, and in fact, Casey will remember, we actually shipped Reveal early on, and we had a cut. So our palette is like 9 or 10 colors, and then we had a customer in Japan who was using like 18 data points or 18 categories, and so then the colors started to circle back, and it was like, whoa, who's going to use 18 data points in a chart? That was the first thing. Like, that's not a best practice. But anyway, it's the customer, and the customer is always right. So we updated Reveal now. I think we cover like 16 or 18 unique colors. But in the SDK, you can have as many as you want. But you can clearly see in this pie chart, very difficult to see what the difference is between the pie slices based on the color. And so just a few examples of bad practices there. The next best practice, avoid chart junk. This is something that we don't see as much anymore, but it's important to make sure that you don't think, it's going to come back en vogue. So avoid things like 3D, shading, heavy grid lines. I said whimsical font choice, background imagery. Edward Tufte is like the father of data visualization. And basically he said, above all else, show the data. So make sure you're showing the data in the best light. This is an extreme example, but if anyone has seen charts in the last 15 years, you've seen plenty of examples that look exactly like what we see on the left. So we've removed the background imagery, removed the shading, the unnecessary text underneath, and on the right-hand side, we have a clean visualization, very easy to know what we're looking at. And now you'll also say, hey, how come this isn't sorted like that other one? Well, this is a time series. So I don't want to sort a time series because then it's unordered time. So this needs to be in an ordered position because I want to see January versus May. And if I ordered it, then all of a sudden it would be like May, February, June, it would get out of whack. So be clear with your data is another one. This is a lot of signal choices within the tools that you use. So even Microsoft Excel, you can do some of this stuff. Make sure you use sorting. Sorting alphabetically really helps people what they're looking for if it's like product names, maybe movie titles, I don't know. Sorting ascending will help me show a story of growth. Descending, maybe declining revenue, declining sales, or comparisons of largest to smallest. Titles are critical. Be as descriptive as you can in a title. Trend lines are another feature in Reveal and in Excel and many applications where you have a series of trend line options to best tell where your data is going. So it's not always clear based on the type of trend line that you pick. And then I say value overlays. This one I maybe should have made the image a little bit bigger, but on the y-axis that goes up and down here on the left, you can see there's a green and a blue bar or a box around the data. That's a value overlay. So as I'm moving my mouse over the data, it's actually highlighting information based on that data point. So I get multiple signals all at once, even with the tooltip, to know what the data story is for what I'm looking at. Highlight what's important, very similar to the previous best practice, but we really want to design visualizations that focus people on what's important for the story that you're trying to tell. And these, again, are all signals, all things that you can use, be it series highlighting, where, you know, in this chart in the upper left, I can actually, the series I'm looking at is brought out to the forefront with color, conditional formatting, annotations always support the story that you're trying to tell, outlier detection, time series forecasting, so being able to look to the future for the data, but highlighting that in my visualization in a way that is telling a story. And then linear regressions are really important, and just being able to show linear regressions based on your variables is stories you tell. Now, honestly, if you're looking at, you know, sales forecasting, it's probably not as important to do linear regression, more important to do series highlighting or time series forecasting, but each of these tools are in your toolbox to help you tell the data story that you need to tell. Now, using effective interactions is also important. So you could overkill on interactions. You want to make sure they're the right interactions at the right time. So things like filtering. If I'm looking at a dashboard, I automatically should have the ability to filter by a property setting, like a category, or a date and time filter. If I'm looking at something that really does clearly need further analysis, I should be able to drill down either into data in the same visualization, or maybe into another dashboard. We're actually going to show you how to do that in Reveal. Or this drill down in something like a tree map is really cool, because not only do you get like a really rich tooltip, but drilling down to do further analysis in place. And something like a tree map is great for that, for really quick analysis. 3D gets a bad rap all the time. We always hear about, you know, top practice, don't use 3D. Well, 3D has its place. So a surface area chart is where 3D belongs. A 3D bar chart with the z-axis is not a good way to tell a revenue story. So you can see here, this is looking at temperature variations in a volcano. From top to bottom, you've got multiple axes, X, Y, and Z, and it's useful. And you need that information in a 3D space. You don't need that to show data like, you know, sales by year. And this is just the same chart shown in a different way that's actually useful and tells the right story. Excessive detail. For this guy, it's more about being smart about labels, being smart about how you present numbers, being smart about like a time series. Like, for example, if you're showing sales by quarter in a chart that's like this big, don't show every day. Show maybe every month. And then if they zoom in, it goes to the week. And then they zoom in and it goes to the day, or they're drilling down, or they're linking. So be smart about showing too much detail, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't help me tell the story. In Reveal, we have this feature called large number formatting, which would take like 12, 000, and we just say 12K, or we say 5M, 50M for millions. So use tools available to you to make this work better. Use the right scale. This is the biggest violator. If any of you watch the news tonight, you will see examples of this. And it's just like, it's you know, there's a whole thing I do about charts that lie. This is charts that lie. So here you'd see this on the news, and you're like, oh my God, the US gross domestic product is in a free fall, because they start the y-axis at 5.25. So what the news outlet is trying to do is make you think that we are in a free fall, or the US is in a free fall, when in reality, if you start the axis at 0, which is where you should start it, or use a clearly visual axis break, you can see that it's declining, but it's not in a free fall. You'll see these examples all the time. And then the final best practice, correlation does not equal causation. I mean, there's so many dumb graphics that you see on the news. And this is an extreme one. In fact, there's a website called tylervegan.com. This guy has dozens of visualizations like this, but I'm watching the news 2 nights ago and I just shook my head because they were relating something to something else and they had nothing to do with each other. So here, oil imports from Norway have nothing to do with drivers killed in collisions with railway trains, but amazingly enough, the data tracks based on the dual y-axis. So all kinds of data out there like this, it really doesn't mean anything. So with those best practices, let's go into the Hall of Shame. And what I want to do is, the reason I've got the Hall of Shame here, and we have one of our UX fellows, Dr. Tobias Kamishki. He's been with Infragistics for a decade. And he had started this Hall of Shame back in like 2009, I think. And we've just grown it. And you can add 20 to the Hall of Shame every day. But it's just charts that lie. This is so sad. This was in Reuters. Reuters is what you would believe a reputable news outlet. But the chart on the left, in order to tell their story, to fit their narrative of the Florida gun law, has dramatically decreased deaths because of the firearms. They reversed the axis. So 0 is actually on the top and 1,000 is on the bottom. When in reality, the Florida gun law, stand your ground, increased deaths. It didn't decrease deaths. But again, it doesn't matter if it decreased or increased. Just show us the data. Show us the right data in the right way. Don't try to mislead. Don't try to lie. This is great. You know, Trump is, he's hilarious. He just says what's on his mind. And you've heard it if you live in the US or even abroad. Hey, you know, Trump saved the economy. He saved the market. If he didn't become president, we would be screwed. Now, that being said, the stock market is on like this massive upward trend. It's incredible. But this type of chart on the left is really showing that because he was elected, there was a major shift in the economy, but that's not necessarily true. So if we look at the grander scheme of things, this area on the left I highlighted is actually just the 1 year prior to his election. If we look at from 2009, you can see that it's basically the same upward trend. There's no doubt during 2013 to 2015, there was some dips, but in general, the stock market just continues to go up. And if you look at the graph a little bit different with 2 different types of trend lines, no matter what, the stock market is going up. So when we look at these micro pieces of time, they can be very misleading. So ensure that when you're looking at data, it is telling the truth. Here's another example of inaccurate encoding. You'll see in this case, government payrolls are up on the left, but the amount of space between 19,500,000 and 20 million is excessive, where if we looked at it just on a regular scale of 10, 20, 30 million, you'll see that the payrolls are relatively stable, and I'm guessing if we looked at a 3-year trend on this, they would just be normal. But this was from an old newspaper, 1937. They were lying with charts back then. This is great. Another example of flipping the y-axis. So here, and I've obfuscated the news outlet on the left, so we don't, judge anyone today. But the Affordable Care Act, clearly ACA, total failure, right? Because look at the trend is going down. Oh my gosh. Well, it's actually upside down. The trend was going up at this point. It went from 4 million to 8 million, or the numbers were 4 million from March 27th to whatever this day was. But again, trying to tell a narrative, most people looking at this would see it and be like, oh yeah, bad news. Here's another example of jobs being taken by migrant workers. And this goes back to volume and bubble charts being a very poor choice for visualizations where you expect a level of detail. So you can see here, there's no way to tell what the actual size of 130 million to 808 to 133 is. What is the delta in size between those bubble charts? are migrant workers really taking jobs, or is the labor force strong with people that live within the country? Really, the best way to look at this is on the right-hand side. And if you look at the overall population in China and the migrant workers, you'll see that migrant workers are a very small percentage of the people potentially taking jobs away from the Chinese population. And then this is one of my favorites. I think this is the last Hall of Shame before I go into the demo, because we want to give some good time there. Let's see, we've got about 15 minutes left. Carbon emissions. I mean, clearly, if I looked at this chart, it looks like Sweden and the United States are on the same track. And what I'm wondering is why we always hear about the US. Like, why do I always hear about the US and carbon emissions? I look at charts like this on the news, it makes no sense to me. Then I look at a chart like this and I'm like, okay, this is making a little bit more sense. The US is a much higher, but I'm not really feeling, it's very hard to compare side by side all of these visualizations to know really what is the data story. Looks like GDPs are similar between US and Sweden, but carbon emissions are not. Looks like China and India really don't have any carbon emissions, which, wow, that's crazy because they really have emerging manufacturing. Now, if we look at this on the whole, this type of visualization actually tells us the real story. The US clearly is leading in carbon emissions, but it's on the same downward slope as Sweden. It's an effort, like there's an effort behind making it lower. But then when we look at China and we look at the world average and we look at India, in a very short period of time, based on GDP, those numbers are actually hockey sticking up. So if we compare, for example, China and India, you would say, yeah, they're both, their carbon emissions are improving. But based on the visualization, based on the story that you want to tell, you can make this look however you want. So you have to know, hey, am I trying to tell a story about US is lowering, China is going higher, or is the world average kind of leveling out so it's a good story? Again, using best practices, not being dishonest with the chart visualization will help you ensure that you're telling the right story. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Casey. She's going to do a demo of some of these best practices in Reveal. And so I will stop showing my screen and I am going to pass this off to you now, Casey.
Okay, and you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And I can't see your screen yet. Oh, yes, I can. Sorry. Yep, we can see it.
What are you seeing now?
We see a one-on-one meeting in 15 minutes.
Okay. So let me just move this over. And now are you seeing Reveal?
Yep, looks great.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through a quick demo of some of the things that Jason just went through using Reveal. So Reveal is, as he kind of went through, our business intelligence solution that serves both as a standalone app and an embedded analytics tool. So when you first come in, I'm going to show you Reveal through the web app, but we also support desktop and iOS and Android as well. So looking here at the Reveal interface, we have a number of built-in samples. We have your own personal dashboard space. You have the concept of teams as well, where I can share and collaborate on dashboards too. Just quickly showing a sample or two. If I come here to this manufacturing dashboard, you can see some of the different visualizations that Jason was showing in his presentation. And then if I come quickly to another one, you can see a few more. You can see the filters that Jason was talking about as well. Here, I can mess with these different filters up at the top. I dynamically change my data on the fly. I can look at different date filters as well as we have a number of the interactions that Jason was talking about. So to show crosshairs on, I can come here and interact with my chart right here at the dashboard level view. I can expand this visualization to get more detail. I can change the chart type, and I can perform some of the statistical functions that were highlighted in the deck, such as forecasting, linear regression, and outlier detection. And when I go through creating, I'll show you what some of those look like as well. As well as exporting. So in Reveal, you can export as an image, PowerPoint, PDF, Excel, or the actual dashboard file too. So since we are a little close on time, I'm going to quickly come into the dashboard creation. So if I come up here to my personal space, I have this Add Dashboard button up here. So once I click that, I'm prompted to then select my data source. So here's all the data sources that I currently have connected in my personal Reveal account, but I can just come up here to add a new data source, and we support, I think, 20 data sources out of the box. We continuously add to each release more and more, as well as we support REST API, and then for our embed customers, we also support in-memory data. I'm going to use just a Excel file though on my OneDrive for the purpose of this demo. So if I just come down here to this sample file that I have, what Reveal will do is it will pull in all of the different sheets within my Excel file and the names that I have for them. So I'm going to use this sales file right here and come into the Reveal editor. So over here, I have all of the fields within my data source. I have my settings up here for the particular chart type that I'm on, where I can change my chart up here at the top. And again, I think we support 30 visualizations out of the box and have more coming each month with our release cycle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to tell my best story here with data. So I'm going to use a KPI versus target. And you can see that the fields over here change based off of the chart that I select. So for this gauge, it says label and value. So what we're doing is we're telling you exactly what you need in order to create each visualization, so it makes it really easy for you as the user. So I need a date, I need a value, and then I need my target, which would be my forecast. Following proper dashboarding practices, I'm going to come here and change my formatting of my values to be large number formatting, and I'm also going to change it to be a currency since I'm looking at new sales. And then in the settings, so for each chart type, your settings are different. So here I can change the period goal. So if I'm looking at my new sales on a month or a yearly, quarterly basis that I really want to know at that time, I can change that here. So I can change this to month to date, and then giving this a title, sales month to date versus forecast. Oops. And then I'm just going to hit the check up there in the right top corner, and then I have my first chart type here. From here, I can then add another visualization up here. We'll put at the top the data that you're already working with, so it's easy for you to just reconnect and start creating again. I could add a totally new data source here if I wanted to, but I'm just going to stick with the same one for the purpose of this demo. And again, just pull in the sales sheet. And then I'm back in the editor. So from here, we also have a couple other features. We have a calculated field and blending data. So if I have my forecast data in my Excel file, and then I have my actual sales data in our analysis services cube, I can merge them on a common field such as date or territory or product, and bring in a different data source from, or a different field from another data source, as well as calculated fields. If I don't have the exact field that I'm looking for within this data source, I can perform any of your regular functions from here and create a new field for myself to use. For this though, I'm going to just create a line chart. I'm going to use date. We'll do new seats and forecast. So now I can see I have my KPI for this month. Now I want to look at that over time. And I want to look at that by month. Just like that. So I'll do sales versus forecast by month. And then from here, I'm going to add an interactive filter at the top. So I'm going to choose date here. And I'm not going to connect it to this first one since that's my KPI. It already has my monthly calculation. So I'm just going to connect it to this one right now. And we recognize the date field that you're using and automatically connect to that particular field. And then when I come up here to change this, so I'll use trailing 12 months, you can see that that visualization changes quickly on the fly. So what I'm going to do now is just duplicate this. So after I duplicate that, I can now come into edit mode, and that filter that I already applied up here is already connected for the next visualization that I'm going to create. So if I wanted to do, showing you quickly another functionality that we have, I have new sales by product. I'm going to come up here and change this to a stacked column here. New sales by product, giving it a good title. And what I'm going to show you is, well, one, I can move this around to make these visualizations look a little nicer to fit my screen the way that I want. I can change the orders of them as I wish. And then what I'm going to show you is dashboard linking. So on top of your traditional drill down where I can here click drill down into day, or if it was by category, whatever hierarchy I had set up within the editor, we also have this concept of dashboard linking. So essentially taking my dashboard drill down to a whole new level. So first, I'm just going to come back into this editor here. And in the settings, every visualization has this. So if I click this add link here, I'm going to, we have the option to link it to another dashboard or a URL. So if I had my sales data in CRM and I was looking at a particular person here, what I could do is when I click on their name, open that link in CRM and it would take me right there. So for dashboard, for this example, I already had one created in my folder here. So I'm going to use this campaign performance. And the common fields that I'm using in both dashboards come up here for me to link them, which I'm going to do. So in that dashboard, it's actually called product versus campaign ID. And I'm going to create a link between this chart here and the other dashboard. So after I save this to, I'm just going to save it in my personal, give it a good title. And then I can see that the new sales is up in March. And I kind of want to know, well, what happened? So I'm just going to click here on this amethyst label in the tooltip. And what it did is now it opens this other dashboard I have set up. It's already filtered by amethyst. I'm looking at the data. I can even come in here and edit to make it look a little nicer. And I can see that, okay, there was a spike in traffic. We spent more money. Conversions were up on the marketing side of things. So what I'm going to do is now I'm just going to come back here to the other dashboard, and I'm just going to now put a note in here. So spend was up in March, which led to more leads and more new seats. Oops. And I can change the text of this. I can change the alignment of the text. And what this now does is this behaves just as a visualization does. I can move this around. I can give people some insights quickly into why you're seeing a particular spike in March. And I know we only have 2 minutes, so I'm probably just going to end there and see if there's any questions.
That's awesome. Yeah, there probably was some. I wasn't paying attention. How do you handle font size on this? Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll let you answer those questions, and I'll just wrap up the slides, and we'll stay on for probably an extra 10 or 15 minutes to answer questions as well. But that's pretty cool. That's real data analysis there. Normally on a drill down, you're like going into some table, and now I've got to like do some mental magic on understanding what the numbers are actually saying, but you're actually linking to a whole different chart that is giving me an entirely new set of information. That's actually really powerful. Really, really powerful. So can you see my screen now, Casey?
Yeah, I can.
All right, cool. So let's wrap this up. Very, very good demo. Thank you very much. Edward Tufte, I mentioned him earlier as the father of data visualization. He basically said, follow these 3 E's. Use visualizations effectively, basically assure readers can easily find your data. Use it ethically. Be honest with your readers. I've shown a handful of examples of dishonesty, and it happens every day in the press. And I challenge everyone, just pick any news channel tonight in your local area, and you will find charts that lie. And then efficiently, make sure you use text and color judiciously. Don't have excessive detail. Use the right visual cues and indicators. So Edward Tufte is the expert, and we will always revert back to him for this high-level guidance. So again, the 10 best practices: understand the user, choose the right chart type, use proper text and color, avoid chart junk, be clear with your data, highlight what's important, use effective interactions. Those 2 are really related to each other. If you go back and look at those slides, use 3D wisely when it's necessary, use the right level of detail. Scale is the biggest reason charts lie. And then correlation does not equal causation. So Reveal can help you today. The great thing about Reveal is you can go try it yourself. Go to revealbi.io, log in for a trial, and everything that you just saw in the demo, you can do yourself, and we ship a bunch of demos with the product. So go sign up. You have a 30-day or 15-day trial. But the idea for app modernization is all of what we showed you today, you can embed inside of your application. So if you want to learn more about Reveal, if you want a personalized demo, email sales@infragistics.com, or of course, email Casey or I. Here is her email, cmcguigan@infragistics.com. I am Jason B@infragistics.com. And I want to thank everyone for attending today. Hopefully you got a lot out of this webinar. What I'm going to do is we're going to go on mute, and we will go ahead and answer questions and hang out for a while. So please populate us with more questions, and we'll help you. So thanks again. Look to the email tomorrow for a link to the video and a link to these PowerPoint slides. Thank you. I guess I'm going to go off audio and video, and I'll just answer questions.